I'm just going to jump right into showing a quick demo. So this is basically a project, and I can just drag and drop in 3D models or 360 media. So this is a model that we collected with a photogrammetry, but I'll show you in a moment a lot of different resources that you can use for getting assets. But you basically just drag and drop in a model, and then we have, if you click edit, this allows you to bring in like this 3D editor tool. And so from here, I could do things like maybe I want to start off by deciding where someone is going to start in the scene. So this avatar object here is saying when somebody puts on a headset or they're starting, this is where the participant's going to be. So you could kind of move that around or maybe change their viewpoint. And this could be even different if you have multiple participants, you could set different starting points. And then additionally, I could say maybe I just want to do like a region or area of interest. And so we have this tool we could drop in that you could add to multiple spots in the scene. So we're automatically going to collect data on everything that someone's looking at, so scan paths and heat maps, but this gives you the option to have additional data like view counts and dwell time and things like that on these areas of interest. And then because this is all going to save into the data file, it's probably good to just add a name for that. But if I jump over to this asset browser, so we have a lot of assets already kind of built that you could just drop right in, like we've already prepared these, and those are objects, avatars, 360 media. But additionally, there's a lot of content libraries. So these are ones where you could use like Sketchfab, and there's over 150,000 Creative Commons free models on here. I know now they've been migrating over to being Fab, but both of those are accessible and they have a lot of models, and these are kind of other libraries. And also there's now, as you're probably aware, a lot of AI content generation tools. And if you do like an image to 3D, you could just upload an image of an object, so you don't even have to do photogrammetry. You could just turn it into a 3D model or even use text to 3D. And we even have examples of doing this in real time now too, where you could just put on a headset and just kind of create a scene on the fly. But if I go back to Sketchfab and maybe I want to just really quickly add an object to my scene, I just click downloadable and I'll just select this chair. And now within just a few moments, I could just click download 3D model. And what I recommend is the GLB format. I mean, these other ones will work because we work with all the major model formats, but I find the GLB is going to give you the best sort of results consistently. And so now if I actually go to webinar, things in the way, sorry. Okay, so now I could just add this to my scene. And now I have the ability to move this object that I just got off Sketchfab. And this would be, if you got this model from anywhere, it's the same thing. You just drag it in. Now I could kind of place it where I want. Maybe I want to change the rotation. And already I can now collect data. So this will come in as an object of interest, and it'll give you the option to say you want to collect view counts or dwell time or average view time, and also grab and interact with the object. And you could give it a name if you want, but I'll just click save. And then I'll close this, and now I'll go back over to this interface, and I'm going to click the refresh button. And now I have these objects that I could say, maybe I want to grab the chair, maybe I want to grab the plant. This first line of checkboxes is saying these are some of the objects of interest that I want to collect additional data on. And so I could check that. And then up here is, I'm just going to give this kind of a label so I can know what this is. But this would also be like if you're saying this has a different condition, like maybe this is a low light environment, or maybe there's something different that happens in here. So this will go into the data files, and this will also allow you to do sort of like parsing through the data to check against different conditions if you put this label in here. And then we have the ability to use different sort of methods of how you go between the trials. I mean, you could set like a timer or custom event, and this could also be like a gaze event or trigger event. So anything that could kind of allow you to go from one trial to the next, but the default, I'll just keep it as key press. And I could check if I want to do practice trials. And I'll just generate a few more kind of sample trials real quick. And the next thing that I'll show you is that we can also bring in like 360 videos and images. And this is also just drag and drop. So if I basically just drop in this model, and now I could even tag some regions of interest on here, and I could kind of resize this or move it and give it a label. And by the way, this also can work with the moving regions, but that's through a different example. So this is just showing you just a really quick way to tag some of these objects, and I'll just call that tire. And then you're going to want to reduce the opacity so that the participant doesn't see that. And then I could call this parking lot. And for the last trial here, I'm just going to show you just really quickly how I can go back to my asset browser. And if I had like an environment, say that I got off a Sketchfab, or I'll just choose this environment, I could just also drag and drop that straight into the GUI and just use that immediately. So now I could drop this in here, and now I have this model. So now I just drop that in, and now I'm just going to have this Jeep model as just a sample of another type of environment. And then I'll just click done. And now on this screen, I could add some additional options, like maybe I want to randomize and run these as blocks of trials, or if I wanted to choose a different avatar. So, and actually, let me go back to, yeah, so I'll click done. And then if I choose between different avatars here, this would be for the multi-user. If I wanted to say, like, even I could use a photo to create an avatar from a photo. And that would be if you're having multiple participants, that would make sense for that. And then I'll just choose the glow man though. And here, Kenneth will go a little bit more into detail on this later, but this is also where you could set some eye tracking thresholds like dwell time, and like this would be set to 500 milliseconds by default. And the fixation duration is set to 1 degree of angular distance. If you're within that threshold, it'll be collecting a fixation. And then it's over 100 milliseconds of time would also set that. And so you can see I just had these 3 trials here. So I'm just have these objects that I could collect data on. And then I have the second one, which is a 360 video. And then this third one, which is the Jeep model. And so now I'll click done. And now I'm just going to click continue, and then I could see, hopefully this headset is still running. And I'm just going to be running the Vive Focus Vision here. So we could choose from a lot of different types of headsets. You could also, if you're not running an eye tracked headset, you could choose like MetaQuest 3, and then you'll just get head positioned for the attentional data, or I could run desktop at the prototype mode. But I'm just going to choose Vive Focus Vision, and then click OK, and let me make sure the headset's running. I gotta have the controllers charged. And this is where you can put in a participant ID if you want, or a name, and this can be customizable as well. And so now I'm just going to press spacebar, and that green point that you see right there, that's the where I'm looking. So that's going to be the gaze point, like the midpoint between the pupils. And so that's going to collect data about where I look around in the scene. And we have different methods that you could use if you aren't able to walk. You could use like an arc teleport transport, or you could use this kind of magic carpet mode, and I could grab these objects and look around. And this is just collecting data about where I'm looking and what I'm interacting with. If I go to this next scene, I'm just looking around in this 360 image. And then for this last one, I'm just in this model here of this car. So now I could look around in here and I could look at the mirror, and this is kind of collecting the data about where I'm looking here. And now after I ran that, the first thing I'll show you is now all of that data can be visualized and viewed. And so if I go to back to my folder, and by the way, I just ran this shortcut to get to my sample project there. This is where you would have your project saved. And now if I run the replay, I could view this in a headset or in a desktop, but like you could actually put on a headset and walk around to see what a participant is viewing. But I'm just going to view this in the desktop, and I'll choose my session that I just ran. And so now I could play this back with the visualizations. I could pause this. You could see here's the pupil diameter. This is giving you the timestamp. I could change some of these parameters, like the view of the heat map and how that looks, or I could toggle that off, or this is showing you the scan path here of where you're looking. And then I could toggle that off, and you could see these points of fixation points of where somebody was in a fixation. So I could kind of scroll through this, or I could even move around and see from different viewpoints. And then if I go to the 360 image, you get kind of the same thing. You get the heat map and scan path. I'm looking at that. But then, and all of this can be customized, or I could use like a first person mode or toggle off pupil diameter. There's a walk path that you could view. And Kenneth will go a little bit more into detail of this later. But what I wanted to show you next is if I just open up the data folder, and then I go here, this is all of the raw data that we've saved. And so now you can see that we have the timestamp, and this also gives you a Unix timestamp that you could synchronize with other programs. And then when I start collecting the eye tracking data, you see there's the combined and individual eye position, the eye rotation values. So if you're doing like convergence or things like that, you get the 6 degrees of freedom of the head. And by the way, this can be added to very easily with just like one line of code. You could add, if you're measuring something else, maybe you want to add heart rate, or you want to add hand position, things like that. It's designed to be very simple to do that. And then if I was within 1 degree of angular distance for over 100 milliseconds, it's going to say that I'm within a fixation. And then otherwise, it's going to collect these points as saccades. And when you're in a saccade, you get the saccade amplitude. So it's frame to frame, it's going to show you the amplitude, the saccade velocity. And then when you're at the end of the saccade, it gives you the average amplitude, the peak velocity. And then you have the pupil diameter, and this is also for individual and combined eye, as well as the eye openness values. And then you have these custom flags. So this is saying when you looked at an object or when you grabbed an object. And by the way, that's also, since I had the acknowledge software running, that's also all collected here as well. So this is saying I was looking at the right mirror since that was the last trial. This would show that all into the physio data, which I was running just some sample EEG data. And then in addition to this raw trial data, there's also a timeline. And this will just say, what are the objects in the scene and what was the sequence of which ones you looked at? And then if it was over 500 milliseconds when you looked at that object of interest, what was the dwell time? And then how many fixations were there while you were in dwell? And that's kind of a timeline overview. And then if you go to the summary, this is where you can kind of see, like, for the whole experiment that you ran, what was the total view counts on the objects you were interested in, the total fixation counts on those objects, the total dwell time, the average saccade amplitude, average saccade velocity, the time to first fixation. And this is also one you would want to modify, like if you want to say, for instance, which I'll show you in a moment, like a visual search, and you want to see what was the time to find the target object, or what was their average heart rate, or what was like the whatever kind of dependent measure that you're looking at that might be affected, you could put that as well into this file. And everything that I just showed right there was just, I didn't have to write any code. I just basically dropped in some stimuli and I got all of that data. And now I could also, I didn't record a video, but you could also have the option of recording a video, which then gives you the ability to do like this is one I'd recorded before. If you're looking at the BioPack physio data, I could also go and bring in a video file. And now what this is going to allow me to do is to scroll through the physio data. And again, this is just sample physio data. I'm not wearing an EEG, obviously, but you can now see when somebody was doing this experience, what was their physio at that moment. You could scrub through, and this could be heart rate or respiration. And then you have these sort of points of event markers. And then I'll show you in a moment, too, that we can also bring in the physio data into the scene to do biofeedback, where you could change something in the scene depending on what the physio data is. But that also, it just doesn't involve any code. I just click the checkbox for that. And let me go back to my slides to see. Oh yeah, so the next thing is, I was just going to explain that to do the multi-user, it doesn't also, you also don't have to do any code. You just run the server script on one machine. And it's the same method. You just can drag and drop your models, or you could go and, which I'll show you in a moment, there's this, if you wanted to modify things, you could add a little bit of code. And that's where it just opens up this Python editor. But you don't have to do anything extra for the multi-user. You just run the server, and then you run the clients on the other machines, and they could choose their avatar. Oh, that's the Dan avatars. That's yeah, so you could just choose whatever client you want to use. And then the multi-user then allows you to run with multiple headsets. So this is just showing like multiple users with their data collected. And this could also work for 360 images. You could look around inside those. You can get the walk path. So this is showing 2 users, and it's showing their path as they walked around through this apartment, their various walk paths, which are color-coded. And so now for this first demonstration, the last thing that I wanted to show you is, so if you did want to modify things with code, or maybe you weren't sure of what to do, as I showed you, it's not really much code and it has all of the documentation. But what makes that really easy now is I could go into this custom trained assistant and I could say, for instance, like, how do I do a gaze-based interaction? So this is saying, like, if you look at an item, something is going to happen based off of that you looked at it. And you could say, show me the full code. And now it's going to give you the instructions of how to do that and give you a working sample that will just, you could just run immediately. And this is whatever you can think of. I mean, that you can ask of this assistant. And honestly, I mean, I've even uploaded PDFs of experiments to this and said, can you run this in VR and show me how to do this in SightLab? And within about 10 minutes, I had something that was working. But this is basically just now it's setting up the scene, choosing an environment. It's adding a cube, which is just like you can have these built-in shapes if you just want to easily just add something. And then it's doing the gaze-based event to say when you focus on that cube, then it's just going to print out cube was gazed at. And then it's giving you some instructions saying, look at the cube. So if I copy this into the Python editor, and this, by the way, is the Wizard IDE, which is where you would kind of be doing any coding. And I'll just save this and run it. And I'll just kind of choose desktop now. And I'm saying, look at the cube to trigger the event. And this is the cube. And now it says cube object was gazed at. So that's a very simple gaze-based experiment, but you could see that I just got that within a few seconds. So and that's just scratching the surface of the power of this, because you could dive pretty deep on getting some pretty complex experiments put together, just because of it's kind of leveraging the tools that we have built into SightLab and Wizard, but then also the ability for this agent to be able to access those tools.